Hi everyone, I'm back with another crochet tutorial, and today I'm going to make this oversized cozy sweater. It's perfect for cooler weather, it layers beautifully, and even though it's taken a little bit longer than my usual DIYs, it's so worth it because I've been wanting a piece like this in my wardrobe for so long. In this video, I'll be walking you guys through step by step how to make this sweater in the size small medium. If you'd like the written pattern with more sizes, you can buy that on my website, amandalovesantos.com. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys. Really quickly before we get started, I would love to know what you guys would like to see on my next crochet tutorials. So leave a comment down below right now with any ideas that you have, or like what's your favorite piece of clothing that you cannot live without. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell as well so that you guys can actually see my DIYs when I upload them. Alright, now enough talk, let's get started with making this sweater. For this project, I'm going to be using 24/7 cotton by Lion brand, and this is in the color Camel. It's so beautiful. The video does not do it justice at all. It's super rich. It's got like a sheen to it, and it's 100% cotton, and it's mercerized cotton. That's why it has the sheen. And it's in medium 4, so that's the weight of the yarn, and I cannot recommend this yarn enough. For the hooks, I'm going to be using 2 different hooks. The first one is a 5mm hook, and then the second one is a smaller 3.75mm hook. Then I'm also going to use a measuring tape, some scissors, a yarn needle or tapestry needle, and then I always end up using like some paper clips to either hold my place or just to like hold the end of the yarn so it doesn't unravel. Alright, so we're gonna start off by crocheting the front panel of this sweater. So I want to show you guys quickly what the shape is gonna look like so that you know what you're doing. So the shape is gonna look roughly like this. We just darken that. So this is going to be the first half of the front panel, and we're going to start off right here. This is going to be our first rows. Our rows are going to go up and down like that, okay? And we're going to start right here. So for the first 8 rows we're going to be increasing, and then after that they're just going to be regular rows where you're keeping the same amount of double crochets in each row. So let's get started on that front panel by crocheting 64 chains with our 5mm hook. Once you've crocheted 64 chains, this is going to count as our foundation. So we're going to double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So just count 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to double crochet into that chain. And these first 3 chains here, they're not going to count as a double crochet. And that's going to stay consistent throughout this whole pattern, is that these 3 chains will never count as a double crochet or a stitch. So I'm going to double crochet into each one of these chains, and in total there's going to be 61 double crochets, and that's not counting the 3 chains. So I'm going to continue double crocheting, and I'll see you once I get to the end of this row. Alright, so I'm at the end of my row, and the next row is where we're going to start to increase. So I'm just going to turn my work. I'm going to crochet 3 chains, and remember this does not count as a double crochet. Then we're going to double crochet into this first stitch here twice. So this is how we're going to increase. So just to review, I did 3 chains and then I did 2 double crochets into that first stitch. And then from there, I'm just gonna double crochet into every single stitch till I get to the end. And now here is the very last stitch in this row. So in this pattern, since we're not counting these 3 chains as a double crochet, the last stitch is going to be right here. So to start the next row, since we're not going to increase here at all on the bottom of the panel, we're just going to turn the work and then crochet 3 chains. And then into this first stitch, we're going to do our first double crochet. And we're going to double crochet into each of these stitches until we get to the last stitch. And then up here, we're going to increase again. So I'll see you guys when I get there. Alright, so I'm coming up to my very last stitch in the 3rd row. Just to recap, the first row, we did 61 double crochets. Second row, we increased by 1 on the very top here. And then on this 3rd row, we're gonna increase by 2. So in this very last stitch, we're going to double crochet 3 times. All into the same stitch. Oops. Okay. Then we're gonna move on to row number 4, so I'm just gonna turn my work. Going to crochet 3 chains here. And we're also going to increase by 2 in this row too. So in this very first stitch, I'm gonna double crochet 3 double crochets once again. So that's 1, that's 2, and that's 3. Okay, so by double crocheting 3 times into this first stitch, I actually increased this row by 2 double crochets from the last row. So I'm going to continue doing that in every row all the way through row 8. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like once I get to row 8. So I just completed row 8, and here's what the top is starting to look like. To give you guys a little bit of reference, with the picture that we drew earlier, we just completed this increase part. So for the rest of the rows, until we get through row 25, we're going to keep the same amount of double crochets in each row. So for example, in this last row, in row 8, we did 74 double crochets. So we're going to keep that amount, 74 double crochets in each row until we get through row 25. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like when I finish row 25. Alright, so I just completed the 25th row. This is what it looks like. You can see the increase right here, and then all of the rest of the rows that were just the same amounts of double crochet in each row. So this is the 25th row, and I'm just going to fasten this off, and the way that I do that is by crocheting 2 chains, and then I just cut the yarn right there. There's different ways that you can fasten off, but this is the way that I do. And then I just secure the knot by just pulling down on it, and then that's it. Now we're going to move on to the second half of this front panel. So we're going to do the same exact pattern, except we're going to do it on this side. And we're going to start with a slip stitch. So let's call this side the inside, and let's call this side the outside. This is the top, and then down here is the bottom. So just for reference, I'm going to be starting this slip stitch right here on the inside top. And this is the very first row that we did. So how I do a slip stitch is just by tying a double knot around my hook. Then I'm actually going to turn this panel towards me, And this little loop right here, I'm gonna put behind the first stitch. So I'm gonna insert my hook into the very first stitch, and then I'm gonna put the loop right on the back. And then I'm gonna yarn over and pull the yarn through that loop and also through the stitch. From there, I am going to chain 3. Just remember that these 3 chains don't count as a double crochet. So we're gonna double crochet into that same first stitch. It's a little tight. Just double crochet, and then we're gonna double crochet into each stitch. So this is the same foundation that we did in the very beginning. So these are the foundation chains that we are double crocheting into. So that's getting our first row started, and if you guys remember, the first row had 61 double crochets. We're gonna follow the same exact pattern that we did over here, and we're gonna replicate it on the other side. So I'm gonna do that, and I will show you guys once I complete the panel. Alright, so here's the completed front panel. I continued through row 25, just double crocheting the same amount of double crochets in each row, which was 74. And then from there, see I still have the yarn attached here, and we're gonna single crochet all along the bottom. So I'm just gonna flip this over. And this is gonna be using the 3.75 millimeter hook. So we're gonna use a smaller hook for this part, and we're gonna start to do the ribbed band. So we're gonna start off just by single crocheting in each stitch. So here I am at the bottom corner on the very last stitch where we left off on the last row, and I'm gonna crochet 1 chain, and I'm just gonna single crochet into each stitch, which it is kind of difficult to see where the stitches are on the bottom here, but it's forgiving, so it's okay if it's not perfect. You can just kind of eyeball it. Alright, so I'm going to continue to single crochet just like I have been all the way to the other side, so the entire bottom of the panel. So I'll see you guys when I get there. So I just completed single crocheting all along the bottom of the panel. So to start our rib band, we're going to start off with 17 chains. And this is going to be roughly 4 inches. And then from there, we're going to flip over the panel so that we can work better. So since we flipped it over, the chains would normally be facing down, but we're just going to turn it towards us so we can really see where the stitches are. From here, we're going to count back 2 chains, and we're going to single crochet into that chain. So that's going to count as 1 single crochet, and then we're going to continue to single crochet in each chain. So it's going to be a total of 16 single crochets. Alright, so here's the very last single crochet, and that's number 16. And now we're going to connect this row of single crochets to the bottom of the panel. We're going to do this using 2 slip stitches. So I'm just going to insert my hook, do a slip stitch here, and then in the stitch right next to it, we're going to do another slip stitch. So to give you guys a breakdown of that, the first slip stitch is to connect this row to the panel. The second slip stitch is to build some height for the next row. So we're going to turn it over now to do the second row. And we don't need to chain one because it's already has enough height with that slip stitch. So now we're going to do 16 single crochets, only using the back loops. And that's going to create a ribbing effect. So we're going to skip these first 2 slip stitches, and we're going to do a single crochet into the back loop, into that first single crochet right there. And then we're just going to continue with the single crochets into the back loop. And for those of you guys who are beginners or who have not done this before, it's going to create these ridges, as you can start to see it. Yeah, it gives it a really cool ribbing effect, which is stretchy and really cool to use on like bands and cuffs and things like that. So that was the very last stitch. I'm just going to count these and make sure that I have 16 just to be sure. 16. Okay, so from here we're going to chain 1, and this is to start our next row. And then we're going to single crochet into the next back loop of the stitch. And we're going to do the same amount. So we're going to keep 16 single crochets in every single row. So one more time I'm going to show you guys how to connect it with the slip stitches and start a new row. So we're just going to slip stitch into the next stitch here, and then into the next one, so that's 2 slip stitches, and then we're going to turn it around, and then from here we're skipping these 2 slip stitches that we just did, and we're going to single crochet into the back loops. Alright, so you're going to continue doing this same process and adding rows, and creating that ribbed band all the way across the bottom panel to the very end. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like once I get to the end. So I've just completed my very last row of single crochets. There's 16 here. So the last thing that I need to do is to slip stitch this. So I'm just going to do the final slip stitch, and then from there we're just going to fasten it off. So here's what the bottom band looks like when you complete it. Now we're going to move on to the back. So for the back piece, it's literally one huge rectangle. And we're going to do the same thing by crocheting rows up and down the panel. There's going to be 50 rows in total of double crochet. And we're going to start off with 86 chains. Okay, so I'm going to start off by crocheting 86 chains. From there, once you have 86 chains, we're going to count back 4 chains, and we're going to double crochet into that chain. So this is the same exact start as the front panel. And again, the 3 chains, these 3 chains right here, they don't count as a double crochet. So I'm going to continue to double crochet in each one of these chains, and that's going to leave me with 83 double crochets. And this is actually going to remain consistent for 50 rows. So we're going to do 50 rows of 83 double crochets. And I'll show you guys what that looks like once I've completed 50 rows. So here's what the back panel will look like once you complete the 50 rows of 83 double crochets. It's literally just a huge square. Alright, then from here I'm going to take my 3.25 millimeter hook, and I'm going to start from the corner that I left off in, and I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did with the first panel, with the front panel. So I'm going to go in from the bottom and single crochet into every single stitch, and then I'm actually going to create the ribbed band down here as well. So it's the exact same process. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like when I finish. So here's what the bottom band looks like when you complete it. Alright, now moving on to the sleeve, we're going to start off with this 5 millimeter hook, and we're going to crochet 50 chains. So there's 50 chains here. Then we're going to count back 4 chains, and we're going to double crochet into that 4th chain. Again, like this whole pattern, these first 3 chains do not count as a double crochet. So we're going to double crochet in each one of these foundation chains, and it's going to come out to a total of 47 double crochets plus these 3 chains here. So we're going to do 30 rows of 47 double crochets in each row. So I'm going to complete that, and I'll show you guys what it looks like when I'm done. So here's what it looks like after I've completed 30 rows of 47 double crochets in each row. So from here we're going to be doing something similar to what we did with the front and the back panel. So we're going to be single crocheting along this bottom part, and after that we're going to add a ribbed band. But it is a little bit different, so I want to make sure you guys see that difference. Alright, so this is the sleeve that I already have completed almost. It's still in a panel, so it's not connected here yet. So this is essentially how this used to look like until I did what I'm about to do. So let me show you guys how to do this. Alright, so we're going to start in this corner. So this right here is the very last row that we did, the very last stitch right here. We're going to be working on the bottom of this panel. And we're going to be working with this 3.75 millimeter hook. So what we're going to do, similar to the front and back panel, we're going to start off with 1 chain. Now here's the big difference. So instead of just single crocheting into every stitch, we're going to single crochet 2 stitches together. So what that looks like is just inserting your hook, grabbing the yarn, so like yarn over, and then into the next stitch, insert the hook, yarn over, and then so now you have 3 loops. And then we're going to yarn over again and bring the yarn through all 3 of these loops. So really what we just did, we made these 2 stitches 1 stitch. Now why are we doing that? We're trying to make all of this like skinnier because it's a cuff, and I want it to be like kind of tight like a cuff instead of just like loose. You don't have to do that, you can do it however you'd like, but this is what I'm going for. So let me show you that one more time. So I'm going to go into the next stitch, yarn over, go into the next stitch, grab the yarn again. Now we have 3 loops, and get the yarn and pull it through all 3 loops. We're just going to do that the entire time. We're going to do that all the way until we get to the end here. So I'll show you guys what that looks like once we get to the end. Alright, so this is what it looks like after I'm done single crocheting along the bottom of the sleeve. And remember, I single crocheted by single crocheting 2 stitches together. And then from here, we're going to create our ribbed band. So it's exactly the same thing that we have been doing, except I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. So this time it's not going to be 4 inches, it's going to be 3 inches. So I'm going to start off by crocheting 14 chains. So that's 14 chains, it's roughly 3 inches. And then from here is where I'm going to flip it over. Like that. Remember, you gotta turn the chains towards you so you can see where the stitches are. And then from here, we're gonna count back 2 chains, and then we're gonna single crochet into that chain. And we're gonna single crochet into, each one of these chains. Alright, so that is 13 single crochets. From there, it's the same exact process as before. I'm just going to go over it one time so that way you guys can see. You're just going to slip stitch into that stitch right next to it, and then slip stitch one more time into the next stitch. Then we're going to flip it over, and then we're gonna skip the 2 slip stitches, and we're gonna single crochet only in the back loop of each one of our single crochets. So it's gonna be 13 single crochets using the back loops only in each one of these rows. So the rest from here is the same exact technique that we used from the ribbed band of the front and the back panel. So you're just going to continue to do the same exact thing until you get to the other side, until you get to the very end of the panel. Alright, so here's what the completed sleeve is going to look like with the ribbed cuff. And you're going to repeat this same exact process with a whole nother sleeve. So obviously we need 2 sleeves. So repeat that process. Once you complete that second sleeve, then we're going to move on to the last step, which is going to close up the sweater and add the sleeves. So I'm going to move these sleeves to the side for now. We'll come back to these in a bit. Now we're going to lay out our front and our back panel of our sweater, and we're going to connect some of the seams. So we're going to start at the top. So you want to make sure that the top of your front panel is lined up with the top of your back panel. And we're going to do this using slip stitches all the way across this little area here. We're going to skip this area, and then we're going to do the same thing on this side. So this is where our head's going to go through, so obviously we don't want to connect this at all. So we're just going to do this side, which is the shoulder area, and then this side. So we're going to start here on the right hand side, and we're going to slip stitch all the way across the top here for 15 rows. So I placed a marker right here from both sides, right after the 15th row. And then I tied a double knot around my hook. That's how I got this little loop here. So I'm going to start on the very first stitch. So right here you can see there's 3 chains. So I'm going to insert my hook into the very first chain right here. And then on the back here you can see there is a double crochet, so I'm just going to insert it into this first opening stitch right there. And I'm going to place my loop right on the back, and I'm going to yarn over through my loop and also through the 2 stitches there. And then from there I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch on both of the panels. And then I'm going to bring the yarn through and do a slip stitch. So I'm just going to continue to slip stitch through both of the panels, so that's what's going to connect them. And it can be a little bit difficult to see where the stitches are, but it's really not that big of a deal if you do it in the wrong place. Just try to keep the rows consistent. So for example, I'm going into my 5th row here, so I want to make sure I'm going into my 5th row over here. So as long as you keep the rows consistent, you're going to end up in the same place. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like once I complete slip stitching all the way through row 15. So I got through the 15th row here. Here's what it looks like. Simple. And then I'm going to fasten it off now. Alright, so now that we've connected this side, we're going to slide on over to the left side. I have my 15th row from the edge marked right here on both sides again. And this is actually going to be my starting point this time. And from here I'm going to do the same exact thing that I just did on the other side, right across the top here until I get to the end. So I got to the other end here and I'm going to fasten this one off too. So once we've connected both shoulders, so we're going to open it up and here's our back panel, here's our front panel, and we're going to attach our first sleeve right here on the right hand side. So here's my sleeve here. I placed the marker right at the middle point of the entire sleeve. So if you guys remember, the whole sleeve is 30 rows. So I counted 15 rows in and then I placed a marker right in the stitch in between that 15th row and the 16th row. So what exactly is that marker for? We're gonna line up that marker with the seam here on the shoulder. So I'm actually going to place the marker into that seam as well. Once you have your midpoint here marked and lined up with this shoulder seam, we're going to start to slip stitch from the bottom here all the way across. Alright, so I've got my midpoint lined up with the seam here, and just like we did the slip stitches over here, we're going to do the same thing across the sleeve. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I'm not going to count every single stitch just because it's really not that serious. I've got my midpoint lined up with the seam, so as long as I have that lined up, everything else is going to look symmetrical. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit just to see where I should start. So I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch right over here, and as well as the first stitch on the sleeve. Then I'm going to place my loop right on the back, and I'm going to do a slip stitch. Then from there I'm going to go into the second stitch on both of them and then do my slip stitch, do the next stitch, and so on. So I'm going to keep slip stitching all the way across. So once you've slip stitched all the way across the sleeve and now the sleeve is connected to the front and the back panels, we're going to fasten this off. Right now, finally, we're going to close up the sleeve and the side of our sweater. So I'm just going to fold this over now. So I've lined up my edges on the sleeve and the side panel. So I'm going to start to slip stitch all the way across these edges here on the sleeve. I'm going to make a turn and then slip stitch down the panel. Now I've marked right here where I'm going to stop slip stitching. So that's around 7 inches from the very bottom of the back panel. And that's because I want the side of my sweater to have like this open seam. That's what I prefer. You guys don't have to do that. If you don't want an open seam, you can just slip stitch it all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to start slip stitching through the sleeve and down to this marker. So to start off this slip stitch, I'm going to insert my hook into the first stitch on this side and the first stitch on the other side. And then insert my loop behind it and just slip stitch through both. Go into my next stitch. This part's going to be super simple because all the stitches are really easy to see. So I've just connected the sleeve and I've come right here to this point, and now we're going to slip stitch down to the marker. So I slip stitched down the side of the panel and I stopped about 7 inches from the bottom of the back panel. And then I'm gonna fasten this off. And then you're gonna repeat all of this on the other side. Now once you're done closing up both of your sleeves, the side panels, we're gonna flip it where the seams are on the inside. And then next we're gonna clean up this neckline by single crocheting all the way around. So I'm going to be using this 3.75 millimeter hook, the smaller hook, and I'm gonna flip it to the back, and we're gonna start right in the back of the neck. So this area right here is the back of the neck. So I'm going to choose a stitch from the back of the neck, and I'm going to do a slip stitch to get started. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to start single crocheting. So I'm just going to single crochet into every stitch. So again, this is just to clean up the neckline, so if you don't know where to put a stitch, it's completely fine, just eyeball it. And then we're just going to continue single crocheting all the way around through the front, all the way around to where we started. So after we've crocheted all the way around the neck back to where we started, we're going to take our very last stitch and we're going to pull it through the very first stitch that we did. Just like that. And then from there we're just going to fasten it off. Alright, now the final thing that we're going to do is hide all of these loose ends of yarn. So I'm just going to take my yarn needle here and feed the yarn through that needle. Then I'm going to hide the yarn by inserting the needle behind some of these stitches here. You can do like a good inch or 2, and then you can cut the yarn. So just like that, and then pull the yarn through, and then you can just cut off the excess. And we're going to continue to do that with all of these loose ends. So this one I'm probably going to do this way. I'll show you one more time. So just continue that process and hide all the loose ends, and then your sweater is complete. I hope you guys liked this tutorial, and I would love to hear your feedback. Was it easy to follow? Was it a little bit more challenging? Or is this your very first crochet project ever? Comment a leaf emoji if this is your first or second crochet project. Congrats to you, and I encourage you guys just to keep going. Like, even if it was challenging, it definitely gets easier as you go, and the more projects you take on, you just build that confidence. Don't be discouraged if you mess up, because that's just part of the learning process. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I do read them and I do reply to them. If you guys liked this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more DIYs. I just made this beautiful crochet tank top that I love, and I wear it with everything. So if you guys want to see how to make that, go check out my channel, and make sure you hit the notification bell so that you can actually see my videos when I upload them. Again, if you'd like the written version of this pattern, it's available on my website, amandalovesantos.com. I'll leave a link down below. I'm also looking for pattern testers, so if you would like to test an upcoming pattern, I'll leave a link down below for anyone that's interested in that. And as always, I have a quote for you guys before I leave. A good idea becomes a great idea when you let it out. And this quote stood out to me today because I have so many ideas, especially when I'm in my flow and I'm working on different projects. I get so many ideas. Like, it's almost hard for me to actually finish a project because I have like 10 other things that I was just inspired to do because of working on this project. So I have a lot of ideas, and what I've noticed is that when an idea comes to my mind, it's good. Like, it's a good idea, but the magic doesn't happen until I start talking about this idea, until I start writing it down, until I start sketching it out and creating what I was thinking about. That's where the real magic happens. When you're just thinking of an idea, like for example this sweater. I was thinking about this sweater for like 2 weeks straight. I was just thinking about what the sweater was going to be like. I was looking at other sweaters. I was trying to figure out, you know, what details I wanted my sweater to have. But it wasn't until I actually started sketching it out and actually started creating it that it evolved into what it is now. Like, a lot of people get discouraged, and even myself, I get discouraged too when I have an idea and I start making it and it's not the way that I envisioned it. But I've learned to embrace that. Instead of getting discouraged and being like, oh, I don't even want to finish this. Don't do that. Instead, embrace the fact like, oh yeah, this is different from the way I envisioned it, because this is real life, you know, like in your head, everything's perfect. My advice to you and to myself when I start to feel discouraged and like I don't want to even continue with this project is don't stop, just keep going. And don't be so limited into thinking like, oh, this has to be exactly the way I envision it. Like, it can be different and it can even be better. And even if you don't love what you made, chances are that you learned something from it and you're going to be able to use that in future projects. Now, I apologize because the lighting in here is changing like every second. Like, there's clouds passing by the sun or something. See, look, it's like becoming darker again. But yeah, I'm going to leave it off on that note, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Stay creating. Hit me up on Instagram if you want to show me what you made, whether it's a sweater, whether it's something completely different. I would love to see it. Tag me on Instagram, AmandaLoveSantos, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!